folks, John from AIFA Alcoholic again. Today's conversation is with Laura Hug from the Keep Coming Back comedy show. We discussed drugs, alcohol, pissing ourselves, puking, finding recovery, losing it, finding it again, and trying to find the humor in all of it. I think the thing that really struck me was the idea of the inner concession and that moment of realizing that the thing we're doing is finally not going to be doable anymore. It was a great conversation, very entertaining, very informative, and very, very insightful. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Laura Hug. Laura, thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it. I always enjoy speaking with comedians on who are in recovery on the show. They definitely have interesting perspective on it all. And not only, I mean, we can all see the humor in it, right? But I think that it's definitely something that comes across where you're like, yeah, how absolutely, at least for me, how absurd it all seems now in hindsight. But
do you
first,
mean, what can I ask you?
Sure.
What seems, sir? Do you mean when we were out there drinking or using and other, whatever the other things are that were?
Yeah, the behavior.
Yeah.
Whatever the cunning, baffling, and powerful, but it's just, to me, it just seems absurd because I hear about things that people are doing out there and I go, oh my God, I can't imagine ever doing that ever again. I mean, maybe I can a little bit, but like, it just seems just frightening to me. But thank you for coming on and agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. What is your earliest memory with alcohol? Do you remember it growing up as a kid? Was it in the family?
Yes. I mean, I remember, what's my earliest memory? I mean, I don't remember my first memory, but I remember my grandparents, like I stayed with them a lot. My mother worked, my father was not, and they were not together by the time I was, they were divorced when I was very, very young, like a toddler or baby. And my father was gone for a long time for various reasons between my parents. And so I stayed a lot with my grandparents, and my grandparents would have cocktail hour. Like, they are not fancy. They're very middle class, Midwestern, but they would, around, I guess, whatever the 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock hour, they would have cocktails together, which actually now I remember that's kind of nice and civilized, like it's kind of sweet, And my grandpa had these mid-century steel shot glasses that he would pour his drinks with. And I remember their glassware a lot now. It's funny, it's coming back to me. And I would go in and I would lick there would be like always a tiny drop of alcohol in there. And I would go in and I would lick it out. I like the smell of it. I don't know if he was a Scotch or a whiskey drinker. I became a Scotch out of the two camps, brown liquor camps. I was just talking about this with people yesterday. I feel like you're either vodka or gin, or you're bourbon or Scotch, or you're whiskey or Scotch. I'm Scotch and gin, both of which I often feel like I didn't get to spend as much time with as I would have liked. I drank a lot of beer, but or your vodka and whiskey. I don't, whatever. I don't know what the studies say, and I don't really need to know. But anyway, I digress. So you can see just the memory of it, like, takes me to a place where I'm like, it opens up a whole world. Yeah. So I remember that, and I remember a family friend giving my them some apricot brandy, and where that sat, and every once in a while, I don't know if I ever drank it. And I mean, I might have been given some. And also at meals, I would get like a teaspoon of wine with like a bunch of water in a fancy glass at like a holiday meal.
Huh.
I don't know if you got that.
No.
And then, okay. And then that was something that they allowed me to have. And then my grandmother, I was a little older, she started pouring grape Mad Dog over ice cream, and she gave me some of that. And then my mother took me to this one restaurant, and they had a Kahlua sundae. And so now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, so I would get to have a Kahlua sundae. They didn't see a problem with it, and neither did I. But
how old were you with it when this was happening?
I mean, I don't know if I was maybe between 9 and 10 with the Mad Dog over ice cream. I mean, there's so many things. It was like Breyers, which was like the natural ice cream, and then Mad Dog, which is like, that models such a bizarre dietary and schizophrenic like relationship with food and sugar and carbs and alcohol. I mean, it's just like, it's everything. It's like wearing, a Chanel purse and Old Navy. I mean, it's just not, neither one is gonna matters. I mean, so anyway, yeah. So and then the Kahlua sundae was I was probably preteen because I remember we lived in that neighborhood at that time where that restaurant was. So always there's been alcohol in my life, and I was given it in measured amounts or in controlled amounts. But I always look forward to it, which one of my, I guess, one of my spiritual advisors, one of my trusted spiritual advisors in my various recovery groups told me that alcoholics have a heightened awareness around alcohol. And so, when I was trying to really see my alcoholism, memories like that come up, like remembering like, oh, when we go there, you get to, I mean, everybody probably has a thing where you're like, oh, when we go to so-and-so, we always get this sandwich, or this is where you go and you do the thing, it's like a tourist destination.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, there's all those little clicks of remembering the way that something might have tasted or felt or smelled, or just that sort of that sensory memory that comes back with those things. And definitely like Mad Dog and ice cream, I have never heard that before. Wow.
My grandma was always looking for inventive new snacks. I mean, food is definitely something too. Was a comfort and a weapon, and a crutch and a problem. So on top of being, necessary for life. So
right.
But yeah, I don't know. I think grandma was slipping at that point. My grandmother was an alcoholic too. My maternal grandmother was an alcoholic, and my mother was an alcoholic.
So when did you first start drinking like alcoholically?
I mean, I had my first drunk where I had access to, I had access to a large amount and no parental no authority interference at 13.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I stole a bottle of wine from these people that were in a party room in this apartment building where I was with my friends, and drank it with my friends. And I don't remember if we tried pot too. I was 13, and I got wasted, like completely. I don't know if I blacked out. I mean, I passed out. I got sick, and I don't know if I was I wasn't moving. So I don't know if that constitutes passed out or blacked out, but I don't remember some of it. I went like a little wild and got sick, and then that was my first. And then they left. They either went to hide or went to get help. And then I was in this apartment building in like the hallways, because it was this girl, some girl, my friend's friend. And the security guard found me and called. They managed to find my friends and call my mom. I don't know how. And I got in trouble. So, and one of the things that I saw sitting in the rooms of a support group one time, talking about drinking and recovering, I remember it occurred to me that the characteristics of my first drink and my last drink were very similar in a lot of ways. So that like I was able to see that my drinking really, really took me, that I didn't have agency over it, and that my life was something that almost started happening between drinking. And it was hard to see it because I was young. At the time I was like in my 20s. And so, and also I have very, I think like a lot of alcoholics, I have a lot of codependency. And so my drinking and sometimes my consumption of substances was also directly correlated to wanting to get the approval of the people that I was with.
Yeah.
And, either to make me comfortable, or because they told me to, or also then because I wanted it. So it was hard to see that. But yeah, my drinking pretty much didn't really change. I often went to it with a no plan or a loose plan, or it came my way, but suddenly that's what I was doing until I was stopped in some way.
No plan and loose plan sounds about right, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just always, I feel like everything, obviously everything we did revolved around finding booze, but it was this daily thing of how are we going to get fucked up tonight? Like, whether it be just got to get through work and then we'll get off of work and we'll take some tip money or whatever. I mean, I remember one point, and we still joke and laugh about this, because we had at one house that I had, we had 3 couches. And so we went and pulled all of the change out of 3 couches and got like this big case of beer and a bucket of chicken. We were able to manage that in whatever 1998 this was. But that was the most important thing we were going to do that day, was dig change out of the couch so we could get drunk and eat chicken.
I'm glad you got something to eat. That's what I mean. That's also a lot of change. I mean, I don't know what kind of beer it was, but like,
it was cheap.
I'm surprised nobody. Okay, well, I'm surprised nobody got that. If there was that much money laying around that you didn't.
You would have any numerous amount of people who would flop on these couches in their clothes. I'm assuming now, looking back, that it was just change that fell out of everybody's pockets because they were passed out on a couch.
Yeah.
And I remember that because it was also, there was a Planet of the Apes marathon on like TNT. So that was the day that we got, it was change, beer, chicken, Planet of the Apes. And so that's very, that was the highlight.
Like, and if it could just happen that way, like nobody would really stray from the plan or suddenly think, you know what would make this better? Like an indoor bonfire, or calling one of our jobs, or going outside, or let's try to huff this. There's always some under the influence then, right? You're like, so we're just gonna, and sometimes you could just kick back and have a raucous time and maybe nothing really happened. But could you really, you didn't really have agency over it,
No,
right? It's like,
absolutely not.
usually probably none of your other couch change picking, chicken eating friends probably had any either.
No, there was lots of problems. There were break-ins in the house, and there was the cops being
Probably
called.
people you knew.
Yes, of course, absolutely, 100%. So
Mhm.
yeah, so you are going through this loose plan of drinking in your 20s, and you said nothing really stopped you until
Teens.
in teens.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
drank. I still. It's, you don't owe me an apology, but thank you. No, I drank. So I drank at 13, and then I got in trouble a little bit, and I didn't do it. I didn't want to do it really again. And then I don't know. I feel like I got drunk at 13, and I think it started showing up with regularity. It started to show up progressively. By the time I was 14, it was, I was one of the, weekend kind of bad kids, or in a subset of them, and then it stayed. And because I was in school and at home, it was mostly weekend stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm a businessman and I have to wait, hard day. But actually, yeah, so it was weekends, and then it was drugs, mostly like weed, and then LSD. Maybe you try to do some weird shit like whippets or something. And then
That sounds very
psychedelic.
familiar, by the
Yeah.
way. There were lots of runs to the porno shop because that's where they sold the box of whippets and the balloon and the cracker. So
Okay.
somebody would make a run to
What's a
the adult
crack?
books. A cracker is so it's like this little two-piece metal tube that's maybe 4 or 5 inches tall. And so you put the whippet container in there, you put the balloon on one end, you twist it, that cracks open the canister of air, which fills the balloon up. Then you take the balloon off the cracker and you can just huff it.
Oh, okay. It's interesting. I didn't do a ton of whippets. But
Apparently I did.
I mean, also other people would help, when it came to tools, I was like, someone's gonna have to do this for me. There was like very few, I sound very measured and like easy to be around, but we're not even getting into the behavior, like
Right.
the socialization, the monsters that, the sad, happy, what's going to show up today.
Yeah, what kind of behaviors? Like you just manic like that, you said, or bipolar, like sad and happy and
I mean, I don't, I'm just starting to sort of get a picture, looking at what I was like before I started the drinking. So I've been trying to see my temperament, and remember what it was like to be in my skin before I went to a drink. So I was using a lot of other stuff though, isolation and, pitting, a fantasy escape, toys, just like, uh, I don't know, just dynamics within my friendships, um, to try to be comfortable in my skin. So I think when I drank, it made me laugh and not care. Like you see a lot of teenagers or young people they're like having a great time and they also don't care. And then there's always that one kid who like falls off a bridge or gets permanent brain damage or gets sent away, maybe, you were that kid, or um and then of course there was, sexual stimulation, dealing with puberty, these things that were happening in me and everyone else, and you throw liquor on that. And I think I was, you know I just, I drank it because it made me have a fun time, and I wanted to have a good time, and it was like an event or an adventure. But then, sometimes a lot of the times the negative emotions would get in, the things that I was hoping to change, like sadness or anger, insecurity, jealousy. Those things just started getting in probably relatively soon.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's where those other things came in as an extra layer of trying to feel differently, think differently, have a different experience.
So including all of these things, all of these difficulties and struggles that we're going through as just human beings, and then adding the liquor and making the mess of ourselves, was there a point at which some external consequences arose,
I
either
mean,
from adults or from authority figures, the law, stuff like that?
yeah, I mean, I got in trouble with my parents. They didn't, want me to, or my mom. And then later on, my stepfather came in when I was so, but I still feel like I went out every weekend and I would come home and throw up in my pillow, in my bed. It's a miracle I didn't choke to death. Um, I mean, yeah, I had a bad reputation. I didn't participate. I got increasingly paranoid when I was sober. I had a bad reputation, for lack of a better way to put it, which I would say, based on why I was labeled that way, I was probably deserved. I was definitely antisocial in a lot of ways. Yeah, some consequences for my sexual behavior, some, pretty extreme consequences there. Yeah, and then failing school, just not being able to go after a while, being like, really, uh couldn't handle it, like, paranoid,
Mm-hmm.
um and so I ended up failing the 11th grade, and then um leaving the school I was in, which I wanted to be there because it was an art school, like a performing, and it was all arts and creative and performing arts. And but I couldn't participate, or if I started to participate, I had no um I had no ability to see like a long-term plan, or to also how to manage my emotions of like longing, or desire, also jealousy, fear. I didn't know how to manage that stuff. So those are, I mean, to me, those are sort of the long, if you're lucky enough to live, because I had friends like you probably who died young. um then those that don't die young and live that way, it's like a long, slow death of the quality of your life. So I managed to go to another school and graduate. I didn't go to college. And then it was like a pattern of like turning down opportunities that would have probably improved or the quality of my life or changed the course of my life, but I had no ability to sustain my part in those
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a
It's a long-winded answer. So
no. It's just I had a moment that still fills me with a little bit of disappointment and regret. And I had a very close friend of mine in high school who went on to work with a pretty big rock band. And I remember getting backstage. They were in town one time and we're all backstage and hanging out. And one of the things I always wanted to be was a radio DJ. And I volunteered and I did that like with a high school radio station, a college radio station years ago. And he was like, I would love to introduce you to some of these people at this radio station and all this stuff, but you're just so drunk, John. I can't introduce you. And I was like devastated that I was just, that missed opportunity that could have been any number of things. It could have been nothing, but it could have been any number of things. It just wasn't available to me because of my alcoholism.
Yeah.
Because of my drinking.
Yeah. I mean, I look at that stuff like, it's really, it's like for people that are alcoholic, we have this like different, if you believe the like medical view or the disease model, which does speak to my experience, it's like I cannot have any of it in my system or otherwise it's all I want to do.
Yeah.
Sugar is very close to, that's a very close cousin that I deal with now, but and I think there's correlation, but I also think like hearing that it's like, when people have to get wasted to show up to the thing that they really want to do, there's a tension within them that is it is an innate disbelief in themselves that has to be reckoned with eventually. And what happens, I feel like the middle thing is you have to get the alcoholism treated. You have to get it stopped and suspended or whatever, however you want to put it. That has to be controlled, right? Like, and I don't mean controlled like drinking, or by, it has to be stopped, and then an examination of those, and that's sort of where I'm at now. And it eventually, sometimes sooner rather than later, it depends upon the person, and a person like myself, their ability to hammer things out with, all right, you can have the drinking, I'll use the support, I'll use the help, but I got the rest of it. And then you're like, I do not got the rest of it, like, so I think that reckoning with why somebody would need to get hammered to have this opportunity, that has to be reckoned with. And that is emotional sobriety. And that is the work that we do for the rest of our days, one day at a time, if you're in that camp.
Yeah. So after you graduated high school and you're drinking, how long did that go on before it didn't?
Well, it was within the year, I think, that I graduated. I moved out just before I turned 18. I was living with a couple of people that were a little older. I had like 4 of us in an apartment, one of whom had a kid. That was like, there's another sign of progression that it's like not a game, or it's not a, it's not about it. This is not an artistic movement. This is like really non-functioning people living, when there's a kid living there. But that was a drag, poor kid. I mean, he's still alive and he's doing all right, but So tried to stop when I was 8. I think I went to a 12-step meeting for drinking when I was 18 the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, I had just a bad night related to drinking, and I stopped on my own. And within that, somehow, I think my roommate was going to a 12-step program and was like, you should think about it. And I guess I'd had enough humiliation around this one particular drinking episode, drunk, that I was willing to go. But I didn't connect right away. I felt really like I did whenever I was in a new situation and completely sober, completely overwhelmed. And what I know now is having hypervigilance, reading the room, and my mind racing a mile a minute, going, okay, who's in charge? What's going on? What's this group? What's that group? Who's that person? How does this look? What's the tone? I mean, just so it's like, if anything message got in there, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So, but did you ask me how I stopped?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that happens. What was the last time, or what was different the last time that made you quit?
Well, so this time that sorry, I'm having a little, this is vitamin C powder. You know that, I don't want to use a name. I don't know what you're branding, I don't want to get in trouble with the Johnson
with the emergency people. No, I think
that's right. It's emergency.
I don't think we're going to get in trouble with them. They're
That's
not
right.
a sponsor, but they could be if they want to.
The chosen supplement drink of all recovering alcoholics. You decide if that's good marketing,
Yeah.
So my last drunk, so I was familiar with 12-step programs, which I would say is how one of the ways that I would say that it's a tool that I use various types of those to support my abstinence, right, from alcohol. Mm-hmm. But I got sober when I was like 19, almost 20, and that lasted a year and a half. And in that time, I basically stopped hanging out with the friends that I had, the places that I went. And I would go to different 12-step meetings. And there was a lot of power, like, and I don't mean an unwielding, manipulative power, but like a community and an energy that was very healing and affirming and fun. And I did that for a year and a half. But when people there tried to get me to do like the more work parts of those programs, like the steps, basically, I didn't want to do it. And I didn't want to look deeply inside myself. And I also didn't want to, at that time, I was not ready to admit that I could never drink again. And I couldn't even articulate that. But when I look back, I just was like, that seems really too much to admit. But if I can just exist in this place, and it's like, I couldn't exist that way. You either have to dig in. It's like going to the doctor. You can go to the doctor, and the doctor can give you medical advice for the problem that you came there for. But if you don't try taking the doctor's advice to the best of your ability, then there's not shit the doctor can do for you. You can go back to the doctor. You're just going to get worse, So
right.
And that's kind of what happened. And so after a year and a half, I went, drank again. And it was like my brain broke apart like that. It was so much psychically, it was so, is that worse, like mentally and emotionally. And and also, I also left that community that I really liked, but it also, just the communal part had stopped giving me any relief. So it was like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And then for 6 years I drank, and I started using harder drugs, intravenous drugs. A lot of times that was, again, an event. Like, some people are like, we're going to go to Disneyland. I'm like, we're going to try crystal meth for the first time. It was like, I didn't, that's kind of how I viewed it. But it just was like, I needed something stronger, either one, to enhance the drinking that was going to get done, whether I wanted to or not. Cause I did not like getting drunk at that point.
Mm.
I didn't like just getting drunk, cause I would get sloppy wasted. I would piss myself. I would throw up, whatever. I never knew, or a combination of, or a fight. I'd get in a fight, and or whatever. And so I needed stronger drugs, and that brings its own ecosystem, and so finally I moved to, and the quality of my relationships and friendships and the people in my life were like not doing well either. I don't want to make a judgment, because water seeks its own level, right? Show
Yeah.
me your companions and I'll tell you who you are. So we were all doing shitty, and I was working, a couple jobs, and I always had this thing where like people saw potential in me. I don't know if it's because like a sense of humor is often equated with being a good person, because laughter brings people relief. But man, laughter on like a sense of humor on a miserable person, that can turn into an ugly thing. So anyway, in that, I moved to Chicago as what they call a geographical cure. I'm like, I'm going to go to a big city and pull my life together. And in a way, that kind of happened, because what happened was all the people that I blamed for my problems, and all the people that I looked to get the stuff that I wanted, were all back home. And I was all alone. And as I like to say, nobody was pissing on myself but me at that point. And I had a bad drunk one night. And so here are the conditions. The night, or the time of my last drinking, I had gone to college. I had started going to college. I was a little later than everyone else. I thought it was really old, but I was 25, and I was working at a coffee shop, and there were a bunch of film students, and entertainment was something that one of the things that I always wanted to do, visual art and entertainment. And I was going to go to this party, and there were going to be film people, students, and just people that I wanted to impress. And I drank with a lot of these people, and I drugged with a lot of these people, and I made an ass out of myself. And we're not even going to talk about the weeping and the sobbing and the breakdowns and the depression that I had when I wasn't wasted, and how hopeless I felt about my job and my relationships, and an inability to connect with people, and the deterioration of my family. Okay, I just talked about it. But so I finally was trying to pull it together. And during the week in school, going there on my own terms helped a little. Like the structure of it, I was interested. I was on the dean's list. I was doing well. But on the weekends, completely obliterated, and like, hanging out with drug dealer, just going to the lowest rent bars. They're like, you don't want to go to that bar. I'm like, that's where we're going tonight. Living this dual life, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And one night I wasn't going to drink, and I went out with my friends or a friend, and I had a little bit of money and I got a little bit of alcohol, and then we went to a festival, and one thing and led to another, and someone has money and they're buying drinks, and the next thing you know, I'm passed out in the street in front of my house. My neighbors brought me in and the building and put me in my apartment. And I woke up, my dog had shit all over because I hadn't taken him out, neglected my poor animal. And I was completely like covered with puke and other, just like it was dirty and in my bed, and which was like a foam mattress from a pull-out couch on the floor. I didn't even own a bed. Like, that was a major purchase I wasn't prepared to do. But so and I woke up and I was like mortified. And I think I was mortified because I remember that I passed out in the street, and that was what was different. Passing out in your bed or at your friend's house or on a couch and you're still not quite 30, that's you can kind of. But when you get a major injury, you end up in a hospital or a shelter. Like, I had a friend one time who woke up in a homeless shelter and wasn't typically homeless. That changes. And so passing out literally in the street during the daytime was like, oh, that's how we see the people living in the park. This is how you get there. One day you just can't keep it together to keep an apartment to have anybody throw it into. And so I had this thing I was doing in my life that I thought could give me a future that I wanted. And I had what they call some call an inner concession, and I conceded. The dialogue that happened inside me was, Laura, do you think if you were to go to this party next weekend and you took a drink, do you think you could keep this from happening again? Like, do you think? And the answer was no, I can't. I do not control alcohol. It controls me. And that was my concession.
Wow.
And so I didn't have another drink after that. I stopped that day, and I called some people that I knew from the time that I had stopped before. I'd started making those phone calls, and slowly started making my way towards recovery and being sober. But it was slow. I was not excited to come back. I wanted to live. I didn't want to drink, but I wanted an option that I could just do on my own. And it's like, that's not realistic. It just didn't work for me. Just doing it on my own didn't change my attitude. My attitude got worse when I was just not drinking.
Yeah, at least not for long. I mean, I know for me, it was many, well, I did it by myself for about 2 months before, and there were still conversations I was having with other people where they're like, hey, you should go to this meeting. This is here. This is available. This really worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you. You're not that different from me. And in fact, you're exactly the same. So give it a shot. But you're right. It doesn't work ultimately. I knew another friend who did it out of spite for years, and was just like, I'm going to do it by myself. And he's like, and the thing that struck me is he said, I never liked it when I was doing it by myself. I did it out of spite and I hated every minute of it. And then once I found a community, once I asked for help, then it was like, oh my God, this is the best thing in the world. This is what I was looking for, whatever that community might be, whatever that group might be. So how many years do you have now?
I've been sober and clean since August the 12th of 1996. So I'm in my 26th year. Oh, I had 25 last August. And God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll make it to 26. And
That's awesome. That's
yeah,
a good long time.
yeah,
That's
I feel very fortunate. It's the most important, I would say, that is the most important thing in my life. That is for sure. And all the facets that protecting that, staying that way, um, is the most important thing in my life.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because without it, there's no, and there's no life, either quickly or slowly. Like, I have friends that have gone on, and some of them, can get things, and have some semblance of a life. I was not very high functioning. It took me even a long time to be relative, like the functioning of level that I am. It took me a long time to get that without drinking, but that's where working on some of the problems other than alcohol come in, which, um, you know, that is work. That's the work worth doing. So
Mhm.
also, so I feel grateful to be willing to look at that, to do that work. And but it's all of it ultimately keeps me away from a drink, you know.
Yeah. The first time and the first time I worked with somebody and I was going through the steps, and I was also just complaining about everything that was wrong with me and the world and all that. And the gentleman who was helping me stopped me and he said, "John, there's going to be some things I'm not going to be able to help you with, and you should probably seek professional help elsewhere for these issues." Stuff with my father and other things like that. And
Yeah,
that was the
yeah,
first time that I realized that I thought, oh, I'm just going to do this thing and then I'll be fixed entirely. And then it was like, oh shit, this just handles this one thing. And then I can look at all of the other problems I have, created
yeah,
on top of all of this, all these years.
sure. And I mean, yeah, yeah. Well, that's good that you did that. I wish I'd have been, I was willing to I was willing to take classes at Second City. So I was willing to go and try to get back on that creative path that I was on. Um, that helped, but to give me guidance in that way. But I was slow to maybe get outside counseling, therapy. But eventually I also did some money work, work around money. That's
Mm-hmm.
another area. I didn't have a lot modeled, and when I was little, and when people tried to tell me things, I just I couldn't I couldn't hold on to the information. There's just a lot of shit going on in here. So yeah. Um my I feel lucky that the people that have guided me and helped me have always been a firm and loving hand of the message that they carry versus, I mean, I've definitely been attracted to dogma and better than, messages or messengers sometimes. But ultimately, what I always end up with is somebody who's firm and loving. And I'm like, what the hell? And I'm not firm and loving. I am wishy-washy and angry. So I have had to I eventually I would like to be. Now I feel like now when I try to help others, I'm able to with whatever, if we're just having a conversation, they're a little curious about their drinking, or if it's something really specific, they know that I've been in that path, or I've worked on this other problem and how it correlates, whatever it is. Now I can let go more. When I couldn't let go, when I got really attached or like approval, see, I would be, I would just be wishy-washy and, kind of have to watch my attitude. I mean, ultimately I had good intentions, but I just
Yeah.
didn't really realize how negative my thinking was, like you talked about, how negative, constant. I have a lot of, I don't want to say self-pity. But I do have sympathy for myself, and or maybe it's like compassion,
Yeah.
that's where I have compassion for myself, which I think I'm at a place now where I can handle that without getting into self-pity.
Right.
And also, and have, I'm working on self-worth and self-love, which is probably something I could have started, but that's just seemed, I was so cynical against that concept. But really, I think trying to get help for your alcoholism is like, is a radical act of self-love, even though it doesn't penetrate those of us that don't live in a sense of our value, our real worth, who we really are.
Mhm.
You know, but that act, just trying to save your own life, is like in a non-destructive way against other people, like, oh, I'm gonna get out of the pool by pushing, like stepping on your head and climbing out. I'm sorry you drowned, but I'm alive. And that's the,
Right.
self-care, it's not like that.
Yeah.
So I hope everybody, I wish everybody could have that sense of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard thing to find, especially for alcoholics
It
like
is a hard
myself.
thing. Yeah. Well, here's the thing that I'll say about alcoholism recovery and 12 steps in that is that takes a limited view of the behavior of others, and we focus on, where we were wrong, and we were blaming other people for things that they didn't, wreckage we caused,
Right.
and we get rid of that wreckage. There's wreckage that is like, as human beings, that we inherit from our society, our environment, our village, and our people and our caregivers. And it's human to have that. But inherited wreckage has to be cleared away too. And and there's a way to do it without turning that into a weapon to use against ourselves and to other people, so we can still live in community and have forgiveness and self-honesty. But that's the sort of that's the next, that's the next thing we work on. Once
Right.
we know our foundation in the sobriety is firm, that would be my hope for people. And
Yeah.
also, it links back, because that keeps us sober. That stuff too leads us right back to the ability to stay here, to not drink, and to be happy, and to give it away and keep it, so
Yeah.
it's connected.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this Keep Coming Back comedy show,
Okay.
please.
So it's a variety show, although it's pretty much just been stand-ups. I mean, I know more stand-ups and storytelling, and I would find that some of the comics that come actually end up, maybe some of them try, like, oh, I've been kind of wanting to work on the story, before you extract, like, set up punchline jokes out of it or whatever.
Right.
So I wanted to do a show of my own, and there's like such a lot of great showcases and not so great showcases here, besides the clubs and the indie shows and things in between. I've been doing stand-up for a decade, and I wanted to do a show of my own. And I had a stand-up show at a vegan restaurant before the lockdown. I'm a vegan. And I did a show there that lasted not quite a year, maybe 7 shows before things locked down and we couldn't do it anymore. And so when things started to open up again, I wanted to have a show of my own to try it. It was time for me to see, and I don't know why I keep coming back. So what I wanted to do, the show is basically about, because I'm in recovery, and I think because I tend to make fun of the process of my life and getting sober, I wanted comics and other comedic performers to come on and do material about something they've gone through. So that's why I say it's a variety show about a variety of recoveries. It's not just for people that quit drinking or drugs. It's also, I give people 6 to 8 minutes and I pay a little bit right now, $10. That's not a lot. I'm just putting it all out there.
Mm-hmm.
Or I give them $20 for 10 to 15 minutes, but at least people know what they're getting. And so, they can come on and they can do material around a process of something. So it has gone from like recovery to process. But so I had a friend on the first show. I talked about my alcoholism, my addiction, my recovery. And I had my friend Mike, who's a comic, came on and talked about when he was a teenager, how his lung collapsed and he almost died. And it happened a couple times. I mean, and how his family was like, yeah, whatever, he's a teenager and he, they didn't believe him. I mean, I think they even said to him, you better be dying. And he was. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, who of us did not always want to actually be dying when somebody tried to make us feel guilty? But see, I was tough. But and then my friend Lauren talked about, so I had another friend on who was in recovery. He did material about his recovery and how it affected like his marriage and raising his kids. And then my friend Lauren had just had a colonoscopy. So she had jokes about the colonoscopy and about like getting older, and also like, why do they have to use a camera and like the horror, just the discomfort of it. So that was what the first show looked like. So what I try to do is get people to come in and talk about a specific thing. And I think that, and how they recovered or how they got through it, if they can find humor in it. And I do let them know there is room in this show to have some dramatic tension. Like I have a very funny on this last show, Lindsay Porter, who was went through fertility and adoption and talked about it. And she actually was the first person on the show who cried, like came to tears. So yeah, so
well, that's awesome. So I mean, I love that it's a storytelling thing too. I mean, I had a colonoscopy last year. I'm just thinking, and I started writing a little bit about it, and I had this sort of working essay. The title was "Prep Wasn't Perfect," because that was so needless to say. So it was a pretty it was a harmless, the whole thing was harmless, but it was traumatic in some very humorous ways, right? Yeah. But yeah. So that, I know, I think that's great. And it doesn't always have to be about recovery from alcohol and 12-step base and stuff like that. So I think that's awesome. And I love any good storytelling night or performance too. Those are great. Yeah,
well, we are working. So my co-producer Kelly, who, it's Memorial Day, so she had family plans. She couldn't be here, but we're keeping a sobriety map, because we have a joke, like we get a lot of people in comedy, and I don't, look, my hat's off to them. Like, I know I roll my eyes, but like, who quit alcohol, which I think if you're going to be driving around is a great idea, but often they do know what they, no offense to where you live, call California sober, which is like, I am going to get off alcohol, but I'm going to either use weed or my weed consumption is, that's California sober. Have you heard that term?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Now I don't have I had another person who was like 12 step sober and recovery sober who did a whole bit about California, like, but I've had a lot of California sober people on there. And really what I want people to do is also impart any tool, positive or negative, really positive. After COVID and the lockdown, after COVID entered our lives, it's not gone. And we all, most of us went through a lockdown, not everybody, but most of us, everyone was impacted by the lockdown. Even if you were the town next door who doesn't lock down, you got affected because if you had to wear a mask when you came to our town or whatever.
Right.
That's what inspired the show, is that I wanted to put a show out there that somebody could come in and that they could laugh, but they could also sit in a room with 4 other people who were doing the best in a humorous way to tell you how they got through something from A to B. And I need all the help I can get when I'm trying to achieve something. I mean,
yeah,
positive achievement is just as hard for me as negative, is surviving something negative. I shouldn't say that, but yeah, that's how. So, but all right, so we've had California sober, and then my joke is, and if you're still drinking, that's Indiana sober. So and that was based on, it's not even important, but that's also a little dig on Indiana because it's got some shitty politics. But I have a lot of friends from Indiana, so it's also a way to make fun of them. But then we had a comic come from Boston who's like, well, I'm OCD and I quit drinking, so I could talk about those things. And I'm like, okay. And then he's like, yeah, I drink, but I'm probably still going to take acid. So it's like, is that Boston sober? So now we're like, we got to see what the map is, of like
sober map. Yes.
Yeah, a sober map of like other, like, how people, it's all, most of it though, the one thing that people try to get out of their lives is booze,
Sure.
The most common thing I see, my day job is in a treatment center. The most common thing most people do is weed. Like that's a really common thing. Weed was not my jam, but alcohol is like, that's the thing I also see a lot of comics really wrestle with and try to give up,
It's tough.
So
It's tough.
yeah, it is tough.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of this, and as very insightful and helpful. And the one you said, my favorite was the inner concession, and I was like, oh, I had one of those. I remember that moment, that it's just.
Do you want to say what it is real quick, or no? Have you said it before?
I mean, the inner concession, it was very similar to yours, but I was sitting with my very last beer on the couch, and I saw everything. I had just moved into a new place. I just bought a new car. I had a used car, and I just started a new job. And there were these series of events, including driving drunk, drinking at work, and stumbling around my apartment or the house while the neighbors or the roommates were here. And I saw it all disappear. Like I just had this image of it, this vision of it all, like the car being gone, me being homeless and not having this job. And it was like, you need to stop this. I don't know for how long. We'll just try a week or 2. And that was the last time. That was almost 7 years ago, but that gave it a name. I never had a name for it before, when I had that moment of, or I guess they call it a moment of clarity, but inner concession sounds to me more accurate.
Well, that's a line from the 12-step book of AA. As there's a line that book says that the people who wrote that book believe that they had to concede to it says we had to concede to our innermost self that we couldn't do something. I don't know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the part I don't remember, but it's like basically that we can't use alcohol safely in any form. And I saw that around alcohol. And then I was lucky that my appetite for drugs, and I was definitely less, I was less particular. I mean, I liked a certain strength, but some people I know wrestle with an addiction to a specific drug, which
Mhm.
has, again, its whole life and identity. And there's probably physical reasons why that drug works with their chemistry and turns on and turns off what it does. But then you have a habit. And I do feel fortunate that my appetite for that went with my drinking. So, but, I don't take any of it for granted. So
No.
that's just my story. Drugs were the
Yeah.
way so anyway, that's, yeah. So I realized I did concede. I had a concession. It was given to me, or I had it. It wasn't something the only thing I could say is that while I was going to school, similar like you had the apartment and the job and the new stuff, I was seeing a counselor, and I went on my own, and I was seeing a counselor at a women's health center, like a sliding scale thing. So I was seeking help, like again, and she kept talking about my drinking and telling me I needed to go to a 12-step program and go to rehab. So I didn't mention that part, but like, I forget now, like there was someone in my ear that I went to willingly and got
Mhm.
relief talking to her. And I think the funny thing is that when you need help with a problem and it's a big problem, you are getting help, but your life is still kind of a shit show. You're being helped, but it's like this isn't enough, or I wish it would be this way. Well, if I design the help, it's gonna be I designed the problem, sort of. Like the problem,
Mhm.
I can't fix the problem that I created. And
Right.
I did, that's a sort of an oversimplification.
But I understand. There needs to be external help from somewhere.
Yeah,
I need somebody else's brain to help me with, because my brain is broken at this point.
it takes a village to get a child sober. That's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Laura, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate this. This is
You're
awesome. It's
welcome.
really
Thank
nice to
you.
meet you and
Nice
talk
to
with
meet
you.
you. Yeah, come in and do your story about your colonoscopy. If you're going to be in the Chicagoland area, let me know.
I promise I will. I will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.